Hey guys, it's Kat, and I want to go over some tarot basics with you. Now, it does depend on what deck you're using somewhat. So I'm going to go over some really general things about tarot because I know like in Wealth, we're working with the Thoth deck, and that has many, many, many other layers of symbols. So I'm going to talk to tarot just as a whole. And some of the super basic things about tarot are understanding the two different types of the deck. There's major arcana, which are generally done in Roman numerals, magician, high priestess, you get the tower, all of these types of things. So those are cards 0 through 21. And then you have the minor arcana, and the minor arcana is divided into 4 suits, and it's much like our playing cards. I mean, there's some extra royalty cards in there and stuff, but it's fairly similar in that idea of what these 4 suits are. And it is helpful to understand that when major arcana comes up, it generally means there's something bigger being worked, like on the spiritual level. Like this is priming you for some big change. It can just be helpful to understand that, like, oh, this isn't just like a little drama going on in my day or something like that. Like this is like big spiritual realignment and some, salve and or coagula work going on that is like changing a little bit of the matter of the being or the way that you see the world, how you connect dots and all of that. Whereas minor arcana is a little bit more of that passing day-to-day type of stuff. It doesn't mean that it can't feel big or have a bigger impact, but it's generally something that's going to be turn over more quickly, kind of like the clouds in the sky, that it's going to shift and move on. When you look at so that's a nice distinction. And then when you look at the minor arcana at the different suits, you have the 4 different suits. So the way, some decks are a little bit different, so definitely consult yours. But with wands, that's correlated to the suit of fire. And with the way that I teach it and that I've learned it and it makes sense to me as well. And I think of that as the first suit. It's very primal. Like the suit, when I think about fire and what that means, it's all about action. There's not much thought to it. Just like, let's just do it. Let's get it done. Let's get sparked. Let's get in action. It's just all of that type of thing. So that's like the general energy of it. That is a masculine suit. So there's a lot of different energetics playing on in the way that you can tune in to the aspects of the cards. So the pattern of the minor arcana in the way that I teach it is wands, and then cups, and then swords, and then pentacles. And it goes masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine. And the easy way to remember that is wands, swords, both kind of penis-like, so those are the masculine ones. Masculine energetic, I love Carolyn Elliott's terms for this, which are a bit more like projective, I think is how she describes it, putting energy out into the world. We're trying to get away from these binary languages. So it's like, what energy are you putting out? What are you cultivating? What's going out there? And then the quote unquote more feminine suits are a little bit more receptive. Like, what are you receiving? What's coming to you? Maybe you're being magnetic, holding space for things, and just going like, right, you don't have to do everything. It can be a bit more of that. So we go wands, fire, projective, getting things out there, followed by cups, receptive. This is the suit of water. Water correlates to emotions. So that flow of emotional energy in the body, in the world, all of that, of like what's flowing, what's moving. I do correlate this to the heart. So that heart energy and that type of movement too. It is, you can do all this action like you do with wands, but then as you kind of evolve, it's like you tune into how does that make me feel? You start feeling things about the world and processing it through your feelings, seeing things through your feelings. So it's just another layer of wisdom, a different type of wisdom. Feeling all the feels, like a little bit more of those water signs, all of that. And then the next suit after that is swords, which is the suit of air, a little bit cooler. Air is correlated to thoughts, mind energy, logistics, strategy, all of that, but it can also be that inner turmoil, the inner spinning. And it is trying to quote unquote make sense of things in the world, like to be able to categorize, label, like science loves doing those types of things. And it's, it's one way of seeing the world. It can also be the energy of like that eagle energy of pulling back and getting more strategic, seeing things from a far away picture. But it can also be very self-centered of seeing things just through your own ego's view of how things have been labeled, categorized, told how they are, those sorts of cultural beliefs and norms. So that kind of all falls into swords, and that's where you get that idea of the masculine thing of the projective. That is the labeling, the categorizing, the beliefs, all of that, so and it can be the strategy, of like let's pull back and make a strategic decision about something and not have the emotions be part of it, of like let's see how it makes sense. But then we're here in the world and going like, but it feels this way. So you can see how all of these different things start coming together and can like sometimes pull against each other or support each other, and going like, right, we can be multifaceted and hold and express many things at once. The final suit in the minor arcana is Pentacles, which is the suit of earth. And this correlates to anything physical, from your body to money to house, like possessions, all of that type of stuff. And, it can sometimes seem very superficial of like, okay, we're, the physical things and and we're much more spiritual beings. But when you connect the dots to the physical world being an expression of spirit, like how spirit is being manifested physically, that really helps to like deepen that idea of pentacles. I actually love the suit of pentacles because it's also really beautiful. It can have the connection of how we as spiritual beings live with the physical world, because it can also be the trees of like, okay, well, they're a physical expression of that type of spirit and connecting with that sort of earth energy as well. So when those cards come up, I just tune in on more of a physical level of like, what's going on. So, the last energetic I want to talk about before I mention some different tools and get in just a little bit more deeply, but I'm not going to overwhelm you in this video. I want to give you a few basic constructs of how to look at tarot in different ways, and then I'm always happy to go into it more. I love teaching tarot, and so I was going to extend that to you, like we could get together and hash out any challenges or specifics or anything. So the other thing with tarot is, there's just so many layers of information there, but I always tend to look at light and shadow dynamics and what that means. So it is very present in the major arcana because there is the light cycle, and I'll be getting into these cycles a bit more in just a minute, but that is cards 1 through 10. So that is one cycle. It happens in the light, and then there's the shadow cycle, which is cards 11 through 20. And yes, there's more cards to the major arcana. There's the Fool, the 0 card, and also the World, the 21 card. But we see those light and shadows. So it can be really interesting to correlate those two cycles of going, okay, when you have the 6 in the light and you have the Lovers, and then you have the 6 in the shadow, which is 16, the Tower, how are those two connected? Like, so it gets some like interesting dialogue when you can look at those two light and shadow cycles. But often what comes up, especially with minor arcana cards, is each card holds both light and shadow. I know you totally are going to get that concept, is that we can see how things can be supportive and light and fun. And then, but it's like, you can also see this other side of it of going like, right, it also holds this dynamic of where things can maybe become manipulative or just a little different perspective. And, you know, just how those two dynamics are always a little bit at play. So when I'm looking at cards, that's why I don't ever consider there to be good cards and bad cards, because every card actually contains both. I see it mostly, it's easiest to understand when you're looking at the court cards in the minor arcana. And in tarot that I teach, it's a little bit different structure to the court cards than the Thoth deck is. And so I'm just going to mention those really quickly. I'm looking through a book that I wrote, just so you know. So I'm more used to the progression of page, knight, queen, king, and that sort of idea of almost like levels of maturity. So with pages, it's that very youthful energy, lots of resilience, willing to learn, and not so wrapped up with failure. Like if something doesn't go right, they get up and try again. And I think of that, you know, it all correlates to the suit, you know. So with wands, it's sort of those initiators of the spirit, the one who kind of can get the passions going. And with cups, you know, the pages are initiators of the heart and of the emotions. And with swords, they're initiators of ideas, like brainstorming of like, oh, there's all these different ideas. And with pentacles, initiators of the body or studying any sort of physical things, getting the work going, of getting the body engaged and like getting people in movement in that sort of way. So, you know, they can be amazing, like pages can be these amazing, lighthearted, like, yes, great, like resilient, doing things, but it can also be very self-absorbed, a little bit immature, self-serving, all of that type of stuff. So you can start seeing, when you think of it as people, like, oh, I can see how that plays out. With knights are generally on a quest. So they're on a quest for something that connects to their suit. And the other thing that's interesting to know about knights is they have been sent on this quest, usually by a queen or a king, you know, so they aren't necessarily coming up with these ideas themselves. They're being sent on this quest. And in order to get the knight to move forward, you've got to engage them and make the connection with their suit. So for like Knight of Wands, he has to really get it, like get that energy, that spark, that action, that passion. His fire's got to be going, and then he'll totally get it and achieve the quest. With the Knight of Cups, his heart has to be in it. He's got to like really feel good about it, really understand like, oh yes, this is in service to, you know, the world or whatever, but it's got to make sense on an emotional and heartfelt level for the Knight of Cups. And with the Knight of Swords, logistically, it's got to make sense. Here's how it's going to go. Like, here's the pattern. Like, this is why we're doing it. You know, so all of this strategy of engagement, and it's just got to make sense to him. And I'm just saying him. You know, it's like the knights can be anybody, and all inclusive. With the Knight of Pentacles, has to be engaged on a physical level. And with the Knight of Pentacles, that knight in particular loves balance, you know, so understanding that this will happen, but it doesn't have to happen in sacrifice to other things. So this knight is the one who's most likely to metaphorically stop at a stream and let the horse have a drink and get off and maybe have a little meal and like really be taking care of the body and seeing the whole experience as a physical experience and be like motivated on that physical level. Could be payment, you know, there's other ways to be motivating somebody on a physical level of like there's money, riches, rewards, whatever, but it often does connect to, you get to also enjoy the experience physically. Like it might be like this beautiful route, like, oh, let's take the scenic route type of thing and go, oh yes, that feels really good to me, because then it's a multi-layered experience. So those are the knights. And you can see like with somebody like the Knight of Pentacles, if they're not engaged at that level, they might be super sluggish. You might be like, why is this person not getting this thing done? Why are they just procrastinating and da 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 da, and going like, okay, that's where the shadow side can come in, is that you know, expectations weren't met. You see how the two of them flow together. Like, of course, people should be able to do things and take care of themselves, but it can, you know, kind of get like, oh, right, did we fully explain and tune in on the expectations? So, like I said, sometimes it's easier to see the light and the shadow in the court cards. With queens, that energy is to hold space. That's what queens do, you know, energetically. And they really want to create an environment for the energetic of the suit. And they can hold space for themselves to create this energy, but they can also be just as rewarded by holding this space for someone else. So the Queen of Wands, she is fiery. I mean, this is that suit of fire. And so she loves like holding space for spirit to come through. So this could be like art and creativity, all types of anything that creates growth and change. Can definitely be like sensuality, sexuality, like all these types of expressive things. And often very physically expressive. So like it could be dance, things like that. And it's just really beautiful. And like I said, she can enjoy doing it, but she can also enjoy holding space for someone else. Like that's the beautiful thing of being a little bit more elevated on the royalty, is that it doesn't all have to be about you. Is that it can be like, oh yeah, I just love having people in this element, and that serves my soul and my spirit as well. Queen of Cups holds space for the heart, for the emotions, for love, all of that. It's generally very soft, and there, you know, there's imagination there too, and that bit of dreaminess and fantasy. But she just wants to hold space for people to express their hearts, speak their emotions. She likes doing that as well. That's often where she will express from. It's like from her emotions, her feelings, her love, and is just that type of person who is in tune there, and can bring that out in others as well, but just by being that way. Queen of Swords. I'm not going into like the specific characteristics of each of these, but just to give you a sense, like, you know, she is holding space for the mind, you know, for wisdom. And it can also be for logistics and strategy, but it can be also for just for clarity, like just speaking clearly, not feeling clouded by, you know, emotions and things like that, of just going like, okay, like speak your ideas. It's not saying that it can't be creative at all. Like definitely that suit of swords is with the air and the thoughts can also connect to words, you know, so it could even be holding space for poetry or for debates, you know, like debates is very much a swords thing. Just holding space for speaking truth, and she likes to come that way and show up that way when in the elevated light part. So you can see how in the shadowy part could be more like manipulation, twisting stories, you know, manipulating them to get what she's actually wanting, and not beholden to this idea of truth, you know, but just using the words to get what she wants. And same thing, I mean, all of them can do that. Like the Queen of Cups could manipulate emotion to get what she wants. And so that's when it's easier to understand the light and shadow. Queen of Discs, Pentacles, like holding space for physical manifestation. So this literally can be just even being in a beautiful space, lush pillows and furry throws and velvet. And like, I'm like, oh my God, I'm describing the room I'm sitting in right now. But it's like, it can be for money and stuff, but it could also be for health. Like, you know, oh, it's like a Queen of Discs, maybe an aerobics teacher, and like holding space for people to show up and connect with their bodies. So there's lots of modern ways to start looking at it of like, right, now could it also be, could the Queen of Pentacles be that person who loves to cook the big meal and everyone shows up and is gathering around the food and enjoying the food? Yeah, that is another manifestation. I mean, like Thanksgiving in the Western world is very like, or in the US, I should just say, is very like gather around this sort of physical thing. And there's other aspects at play too, but it's kind of interesting to go like, okay, how does this show up? What does that look like? So she loves doing that for others. Um, and then with the kings, the idea with the king level is like mastery, like, you know, and as I said, light and shadow, that's kind of what I'm talking about here. As well is it can get twisted, distorted, you know, mastery can mean different things. So, but they are generally at a higher level. Ideally, you know, at the king level, you're thinking about others, not just thinking about yourself and everything being self-serving. You're like, it is like a queen, a more nurturing role of how can I create the best kingdom, the best environment, the best space for others. It is a leadership type of role, lead by doing. So King of Wands is like definitely that master of energy and passion, and is somebody who can spark that in others and get them going. Like I said, like can, you know, designate the knights and all of that, but can also like the King of Wands is the king that's most likely like, okay, I'll get everybody doing things and then I'm going to jump in there too, you know, because it's like, that's just that nature of wands, of wanting to be doing, not just wanting to sit on the throne and sit back. I don't know if you can guess by now who might like doing that, but I don't want to jump ahead, but I'll just connect the dot there. So that's King of Swords. They love being on the throne and just looking at maps and how things are working, or, you know, strategizing and getting everybody doing the jobs and then observing and seeing how it happens. So you can start to see the subtle differences in these suits. With the different elements, and then also with the different hierarchies of the royalty. But after King of Wands, King of Cups, so very much master of the heart and emotions. And that can mean many things, as you know. It can be like very cool and aloof, like I have control of them. But it can also be knowing when it's appropriate and when it isn't, you know? So like maybe I'm going to use super stereotypical things here, but like maybe in the boardroom, not getting emotional there, being more cool and logistical, but then at personal home relationships, just going like, right, you know, I don't have to like hold these in and try to master them, can be a bit more vulnerable. So it doesn't have to mean not being vulnerable, you know, so like you get to explore what that idea of mastery is. And as you're reading, you will see that, like, what does that mean, that leading from the heart, you know? So might be somebody who works more at a nonprofit or something like that, where they're engaged with their heart energy, but not necessarily being led by the emotions. So as I mentioned, King of Swords loves mind, strategy, words, communication. This person could be in marketing, that type of thing, is head of communications, shows up on video, does interviews, those types of things, like very masterful with the word choices, putting together thoughts, helping people to see their point of view. It could be a debater, all of that type of thing. And then using that to lead as well. So using the mind, the words, all of that for communication and leadership. A lot of strategy can be super ego-oriented as well, you know, so as all of these things can be. The King of Pentacles, or discs, so many different names, is, you know, the master of physical environment, master of his own body, holds space for all of that, like understands, like might be one of those leaders that sees how important it is to have those benefits like health insurance, and encouraging people to work out, telling, you know, making sure that people take their lunch breaks, all of that, the understanding how health is really part of wealth and business, and creating a very well-rounded, multifaceted life. As a leader can also be, you know, even somebody like Frank Lloyd Wright. I mean, he's an architect, so he's working in the physical world, building things, but then building structures, not feeling like he has to rip out all the trees, like making the structures work with the trees. So that would be a very King of Pentacles type of thing of going like, how can we work together with nature more? That was a big rundown. And also just to like drive that point home that I was making here about light and shadow is that you could see with a King of Pentacles, it could swing the other way if they aren't elevated. So it could be somebody who's like, let's clear cut this land and we're just going to plant one crop, you know? Like, okay, you can see how there's different kings in there. There's some strategy, some thinking, not a lot of heart going on, but trying to work with the land, but they're actually manipulating it, you know? So it's not to say that that isn't a King of Pentacles thing. So, you know, like feel into that of going like, oh, right. You know, it includes that whole spectrum of things. So, okay. I'm going to flip back in this book and I'm going to show you a tool because the last major thing that I want to talk about is tarot, how it happens in cycles. This helped me the most with tarot reading, where I could lift off the pressure of needing to know what the card was about. And it's understanding that tarot happens in cycles of 10. So I created this system. I just call it the wheel. And it is like a clock with 10 at the top and 5 at the bottom. And the cards go around. So sorry, it's like mirrored backwards for me here. So I'll just keep peering over the edge. So ones, the aces, are like the seeds being planted, filled with potential. So much could come from them. And 10 is sort of the completion point. And there's this whole cycle in between. And yet, isn't it interesting that those two things are back to back? So it's just like, whoa, to feel into that of going like, right, I'm planting a seed and it results with growth, harvesting, like something coming to fruition. And then immediately after feeling that sense of completion, maybe have a feeling of mastery or something, having to go immediately back to the ace. Now it's on a different level. I often think of it actually as like a spiral staircase going up where there's growth. Things don't always happen step by step, all of that, but just to go like, well, that's one thing that's really interesting there. So you can feel into like, which of those do you like more, and going like, oh, sometimes as we get older, we love that 10 energy more, the sense of accomplishment, completion. We have a harder time with the ace energy. Sounds a little bit like pages and kings, you know, of going like, okay, this is where we also see that energy of like that freshness, the resilience, the willing to try again, the hope, faith, you know, of just going like, well, let's just see what happens, versus the, you know, here's what we got, like the completion of a cycle, that confidence that comes from that. So as, you know, the other thing I want to point out in this cycle is I do think of this literally like a wheel. So 10 is at the top and look at what's at the bottom, and 5. That gives you information there as well. The 5 being at the bottom of the wheel lets you know it's the furthest point away from completion. This is so helpful because 5s universally are pretty challenging cards. And, you know, when I look at like the Hierophant in the Major Arcana, it's not, I actually like the Hierophant. I mean, I'm not trying to get into judgment here about the cards. I think they all have amazing lessons. So that's the only one that doesn't feel like super, super challenging to me. But then I love knowing, oh my gosh, it is a 5. So what are the challenging components of it? But when I think about the other cards, especially in the Minor Arcana, going like, oh, those 5s are really challenging. It's like, well, there's a reason. Because to shift the energy of the 5, you got to get off the bottom and then push really hard and then really push the whole time. Like all of this is push, push, push uphill, trying to climb your way along the wheel to get to the 10, where then, you know, you generally celebrate, but sometimes you collapse. Like not all the 10s are super great either. And when, you know, you're at the ace and coming down to the 5, fairly easy. Oops, kind of going like downhill, like almost like getting some momentum, going like, oh, this is great. And then you get the 5 and you're like, oh, I thought it was all going to be easy. It's not. I mean, that's part of the cycles, you know, is I mean, we know that just from living life, but it's kind of fun to see it mirrored back. So, you know, that helps a lot. I've divided things into quadrants as well with this wheel system, so you can see some alignment. So like this potential, a little bit easier, getting some successes, then hit this like intense point at the bottom that you gotta like consciously work out of. I mean, you know, and some people hang out here. But then once you cross that, sixes are generally kind of a little celebration of like, okay, at least I'm not at a 5 anymore. So it's kind of funny. Sevens, another challenging point, because you got to cross over this line of like, I see this as an initiation line, just going like, okay, how do I get that oomph again to make it over that hump and then do this final climb to the top, and what does it take? So, and then 10 is closure of some sort, you know, some sort of lesson that's been integrated. I'm not going to walk through this with each of the suits, but I love talking tarot. I love talking about this sort of stuff. I would gladly do that. But this, you know, like this is usually a 6-week class that I teach. I'm trying to give you some like tidbits to see like, oh, does that start helping you with your thoughts about tarot, where it doesn't feel so individually card connect, you know, where you're like, okay, this is a card. What exactly does this card mean? Can you piece it together with the system? There is one last thing I want to mention. It's easier to see from, I'm trying to decide if I want to show you this other system. I don't think I'm going to show you this other system. There's another author who's come up with a different type of system that is kind of cool. I'd be happy to share. But one thing that I want to mention, since I've already mentioned masculine and feminine energetics, projective versus receptive type of energetics, is that is another thing that you can bring in with numerology, is odd numbers are projective, what you're doing out in the world. Even numbers are receptive, what you're taking in. It's usually take an action, and then you have to sort of see and receive what happened from that action. And that filters through you, and you go, okay, I'm going to take another action. I'm going to do some more expansion. And then it's like, okay, regroup, get my stability back. 5, got to take an action, just because there's so much conflict often going on here at the 5s. And so when you take an action, it gets you somehow moving despite the conflict. And so then go into receptive number, where you sort of go like receiving any accolades. It's that sense of relief of like, okay, I did it. I made it through that really tough point, but then kind of regrouping and going, oh, I mean, I'm only like halfway there. Like so this is like, you got to kind of like boost yourself up with like, here's what you've done. You know, I know there's more to do, but you got it. You're more than halfway. 7, taking action. This is usually some sort of major initiation of how you're making sense in the world. And I'm just thinking through some of the 7s, like 7 is I just think of it as an initiation number, like having to take a step over an initiation line, like really taking a stand. 8, once again, regrouping, seeing how that action landed, what happened. Sometimes it's just like holding steady, like having a bit of that patience, kind of letting some magic kind of work and integrate, let the world like line up. 9 is another final push, last little push to the 10. And so this can be like, sometimes it's motivated by the end. Sometimes it's more like, whew, I'm beaten up a bit, but I got to find that, dig in a little bit, make that last final push to the 10, where it's receiving those deeper lessons of like what did go down in that cycle. And then think of it in terms of the suit, if it's a minor arcana, and if it's a major arcana, to contemplate the light cycle versus the shadow cycle. It's nice to know whether you're in the light cycle or the shadow cycle. Now, since we're multifaceted beings, all these things are, like I said, happening all at once. They can, you can be one type of cycle with your body, one type of cycle with your mind, another cycle with your spirit, and it's all layered and intermingled. But it's just nice to know when you're pulling cards, of going like, okay, like tune in, see, does that energetic of that wheel work for you? I feel like I have given you a enough pointers and other little, like, I think of it as lenses of how to look at tarot, between the wheel, the elements, the light and the shadow, and the projective receptive / masculine feminine energetics. So I hope that helps you start to deepen your own intuition as you're working with tarot. And reach out to me if you want more conversations, or if there's individual cards that aren't making sense to you, or you want to talk through them. I love it. I love pulling out, like, pull out all the fives, including minor and major arcana, and see what types of connections you can make between those numbers. If there's any number that you challenge by, pull them all out and see, like, how do they all feel together? Things like that can be a really great way to, like, start, I don't want to just say making sense, because you want it to, like, be in your body and kind of make sense on that level too, of like, feel into it and go, okay, I'm kind of getting it a little bit. So such a pleasure to meet you. I hope that this awakens much more magic and intuition for you, and you know where to find me. You can always find me at my website, tamingthetangle.com, or in Mighty Network. I'm Kat Bacchus. All right. Thank you. Bye.